Breaking news. The United Nations Security Council have denied the United States' request to reimpose the snapback sanctions on Iran. So I've done multiple videos about this. Just to recap very quickly, last week, as you recall, the United States, Mike Pompeo, he submitted a draft resolution to the UN Security Council to renew this arms embargo on Iran that expires in October. That failed miserably. Only the United States and the Dominican Republic voted for it. China and Russia voted against it. And remember, China and Russia have veto power because they're permanent members on the UN Security Council. 11 members abstained, including the UK and France. Just disaster. Embarrassing disaster. I mean, the United States isolated with the Dominican Republic as their only ally. Yeah. So that failed miserably. And then Mike Pompeo, he gets on the podium and, he throws a little fit and starts saying things like, oh, well, it doesn't matter that the arms embargo failed. I mean, he cried about it. He was giving a conference in Warsaw at the time, right, in Poland. So, he's saying, oh, I just wish that the world would have accompanied us in this endeavor. Yeah. He starts pitching a hissy fit, as they say in the South. And after that, he says, you know what? The draft resolution for the arms embargo failed, but we have another trick up our sleeve. And then he threatens to trigger the snapback sanctions. Okay, so the snapback sanctions, for those of you who don't understand what that means, and I don't blame you because this stuff is complicated, when they were doing the Iran nuclear deal, the JCPOA, at the same time, the UN Security Council passed a resolution 2231. UN Security Council resolution 2231 endorses the JCPOA. Okay, and therein lie the sanctions. And it states that if Iran does not fulfill its obligations in regards to IAEA monitoring, or they start enriching uranium past a certain point, then automatically you will have the previous UN sanctions reimposed on them as a penalty, right? It was kind of like an assurance that they don't veer off course. So Mike Pompeo threatens to use that again. He's like, okay, well, you know what? We're going to trigger the snapback sanctions. We're going to submit a formal letter of complaint to the UN Security Council saying that Iran have not fulfilled their obligations, and therefore within 30 days the sanctions will be triggered. Well, again, this is ridiculous because the United States left the JCPOA in May 2018. They have no legal, moral basis whatsoever to demand that these sanctions be reimplemented. And everyone is in agreement on this point. So, ultimately, the people who decide what would happen, Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, and the President of the United Nations Security Council, who's the ambassador from Indonesia. It's his turn, or their turn, rather. Now, it's a rotating position, remember. So, we had a statement today, we had a decision from the President of the United Nations Security Council, and he told the US to go and screw themselves. Okay, so the President of the UN Security Council on Tuesday rejected the Trump administration's demand to restore all UN sanctions on Iran, a move that drew an angry rebuke from the US. So I'll show you that in a second. So Indonesia's ambassador to the UN, Dian Jani, whose country currently holds a rotating council presidency, made the announcement in response to requests from Russia and China to disclose results of his polling of the views of all 15 council members on the US action. So he held private talks with the Security Council members, and he decided he's not going to allow this. Okay, so let me show you the statement. Again, this was a few hours long, so I had to go digging to find this, okay? But I found it nonetheless. So here it is. You ready? Here you go. His verdict on whether he will allow snapback sanctions to proceed on behalf of the United States vis-a-vis Iran.
Like to resume my function as president of the council. There are questions posed to me on the Russian Federation question, as well as others. Having consulted with members and received letters from many member countries, it is clear for me that there is one member which has a particular position on the issues, while there are significant numbers of members who have contesting views. In my view, there is no consensus in the council. Thus, the president is not in the position to take further action. Thank you.
All right, so you heard him. There's no consensus within the council. Let me read that to you again. He said, in my view, there's no consensus in the council. Thus, the president is not in the position to take further action. He shot it down. It's done. It's over. So that's that. That's that. Now, in response, Kelly Craft, the United States ambassador to the UN, she lost it. So let me play you her statement. And dude, again, I had to go digging for this. And she sounds like a broken record. Okay? She's literally, you can see her reading off of a sheet of Zionist and DOD talking points. It's so boring. Yawn. So anyway, listen to what she says here. Listen to her rebuke.
And let me just make it really, really clear. The Trump administration has no fear in standing in limited company on this matter in light of the unmistakable truth guiding our actions. I only regret that other members of this council have lost their way and now find themselves standing in the company of terrorists. Thank you.
What? Did you hear what she said? The United States ambassador is telling the UN Security Council, remember, this includes the other members of the P5, Russia, China, the UK, France, and the other 9 members, that they are now standing in the company of terrorists. She's accusing them of supporting terrorism. You know, like a brat, a spoiled brat throwing the toys out of the pram. Oh, you won't support us in our imperialist endeavor to dictate and crap all over Iran? Oh, you're terrorists. You're standing in the company of terrorists now. You're supporting terrorism. I want you to think about that for 1 second. The United States is telling France and Germany and the UK, their closest allies, that they are sponsoring terrorism now because they refuse to help them in this illegal endeavor of imposing sanctions on Iran. This is obscene. You must understand that. In the world of diplomacy, this is ludicrous. in a spitting image of Mike Pompeo, and in true American arrogance, she delivers such a ridiculous statement. Only America could do such a thing. It's just obscene. So, once again, if you want to listen to her babble on for 3 hours about, oh, Iran is supporting terrorism and they're supporting the Houthi rebels and, you know, they're supporting Hezbollah. I want you to pay attention to that. The U.S. has sold billions of dollars of weapons, the UK too, and France, to commit genocide in Yemen. And because Iran are helping the Houthis stand up to this genocide, she's trying to lump that in with terrorism. Unbelievable. Yeah, you go look at pictures of Yemeni kids famished, their limbs blown off by US-made and British-made and French-made weapons, and you fucking tell me if that ain't terrorism. Disgusting. So US Ambassador Kelly Craft repeated Pompeo's message, quote, the United States will never allow the world's largest state sponsor of terrorism. Oh my God, here they go again with this fucking phrase. Again. To freely buy and sell planes, tanks, missiles, and other kinds of conventional weapons. Or to have a nuclear weapon. Well, no one asked you your opinion, and even your closest allies, they think you're ridiculous. So, all other 13 members of the UN Security Council, remember, we're talking everyone except the United States and the Dominican Republic. They all submitted statements to the president of the council and said that what the United States is trying to do is illegal. When Mike Pompeo comes out last week and says that, the United States has every legal right to trigger snapback sanctions, they are all in opposition to this statement. As I said here, all United Nations Security Council members, except the Dominican Republic, informed the council that Mike Pompeo's claim that the U.S. has the, quote, legal right to impose all sanctions outlined in UN Security Council Resolution 2231 was illegal since the U.S. withdrew from the JCPOA in May 2018. Of course, I mean, this is blatantly obvious. It's right there out in the open. The UN Security Council Resolution 2231 endorsed the JCPOA. If you withdraw from the JCPOA, you can't use Resolution 2231. It's ridiculous. You don't need to be a lawyer to figure that one out. Nonetheless, I want to explain something to you. So as I said before, the role of, not just the presidency in the UN Security Council, but all other 10 seats besides the P5, they are all rotating memberships, right? So next month in September, Indonesia will no longer hold the presidency of the UN Security Council. Niger will, okay? And Niger's ambassador also agrees that what the US is trying to do is illegal. Niger does not support this illegal, ridiculous, foolish, imperialist attempt to trigger snapback sanctions. So nothing is going to change for the US, okay? If they think that Indonesia being replaced with Niger is going to help their cause, no, this is not happening. So I outlined that here, and also, the statement from Kelly Craft, just ridiculous, accusing even their own allies of supporting terrorism. I mean, this just shows to you how disloyal, how insulting, how callous, and how obscene United States foreign policy is. They literally just called the United Kingdom and France and Germany supporters of terrorism, their own allies, because they won't put on an arms embargo nor trigger snapback sanctions. Obscene. And I just want to highlight to you once again, as I have before, how isolated the United States is on the world stage as of now. I mean, look at this, man. Could you picture such a sight? It's quite striking, honestly. Really, if you told me a year ago though that this would happen, I'm not quite sure I would have believed you. But yeah, this is very big. You can see that there is a willing effort from the EU, from the other members of the UN Security Council, to keep the JCPOA together, right? I mean, if you really want to stop Iran from developing nuclear weapons, which once again, I remind you, that's an imperialist diktat, okay? When you're coming in and you're telling a country what they can do and what they can't do, and imposing your will on them, you're violating their sovereignty, okay? They cloak it as diplomacy. It's not about diplomacy. They just don't want Iran able to defend themselves. Nonetheless, if you are really adamant and you are so afraid of Iran having nuclear weapons, of course you would want to participate in the JCPOA. The United States doesn't care about that. The United States is trying to provoke Iran and abuse them and bully them and harass them and intimidate them all the time. And we've gone through the list before, right? They're flying drones into their airspace. They got their whole fleet off the Persian Gulf. They assassinated Qasem Soleimani and Abu Mahdi. They threatened to confiscate their oil. They're coming in and violating Syrian airspace and harassing the Mahan Air civilian airliner. I mean, this is a concerted effort to harass Iran and intimidate them. That's all it is, man. Make no mistake. Make no mistake. The United States is not interested in diplomacy. Iran has complied with everything thus far. Iran hasn't responded to any of these aggressions, which normally otherwise would be considered acts of war. Could you imagine if Iran flew jets into U.S. airspace? Never mind harassing a civilian airliner? Goodness. They would nuke Iran. But it's okay for the U.S. to do that, right? Could you imagine if Iran parked their fleet off of the coast of California or in the Caribbean, I don't know, in proximity to U.S. borders? Could you imagine that? Could you imagine if they were flying drones into the U.S.? These are acts of war, and Iran has been so patient. I mean, I got to give them props, man. The restraint is unbelievable. But, the United States, of course, they're losing their minds right now, because when the arms embargo expires in October, Iran is free to buy and sell weapons. Yeah, they're going to get their hands on some of those S-400 systems, surface-to-air missiles from Russia. They're very good. Oh, yeah. F-35s ain't worth shit next to that. So, yeah. And of course, they make their own. I showed you the new missiles, the cruise missile, Abu Mahdi. It's named after the Iraqi militia commander, and also the Qasem Soleimani, the ballistic missile. So they got their own weapons to sell as well. But nonetheless, the United States are losing their minds. They don't want Iran able to defend themselves and have access to upgraded weaponry. That means they can fend off the U.S. and they have a stronger defense system in place. And moreover, you got to take into account Israel playing a part in this. Israel, of course, is behind a lot of this. I mean, you remember I covered this a few months ago. So AIPAC sponsored the letter written by Elliot Engel from the AIPAC lobby, the Zionist lobby, to renew this arms embargo. They sent that letter to Mike Pompeo, and it was an AIPAC sponsored letter. So, there's American foreign policy and Israeli foreign policy, one and the same, involved in this, right? And, I always found this quite peculiar, that Israel keeps saying that Iran having nukes is a threat to them. I mean, this is ridiculous, because Iran cannot nuke Israel. It's impossible. Even if Iran had 1 million nukes, they can't use them because Israel is in such close proximity. The Zionist occupation is surrounded by Syria, by Lebanon. The fallout, the radiation would kill people in Lebanon, would kill people in Syria and the other surrounding countries in Egypt. I mean, it's impossible. However, the reverse is not true. Israel can easily nuke Iran and there will be no fallout for them nor for any of their allies, just based on the geography. So I don't even understand that. The only deterrent that Iran would actually have from this is vis-a-vis the United States, of course. And I mean, how can you blame them when they got a fleet parked off of their coast? You really going to blame them? Once again, man, Iran have shown extreme restraint. So anyway, this is, I'm not going to lie, it's quite satisfying to watch the United States get shot down like that. I mean, just, this is really embarrassing. And this shithead over here, Kelly Craft, I mean, she calls herself a diplomat. Mike Pompeo as well. These people are the most undiplomatic diplomats in existence. They're thugs and just vile mobsters, you know. They bully their way around and try to strong arm their allies. I've told you this a million times. Again, further proof. Look how they try to strong arm their allies. Oh, you don't do what we like. We can't have our way. You're supporting terrorism. Shameless. Like in the fucking Security Council. Man, for those of you who are not familiar with the UN, with the world of diplomacy, I mean, I can't overstate how obscene it is to say such a thing. So, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if the US try to impose new sanctions, unilateral sanctions, meaning from their side only, not multilateral from the international community. So you can expect new sanctions from the US for sure, because they're bullies. And, you know, I wouldn't be surprised either if they try to provoke Iran in a military sense, just like they assassinated Soleimani, or they might violate their airspace or intimidate them off of the Persian Gulf. I wouldn't be surprised. They might do that, you know, because they couldn't get their way now. What an embarrassment. I mean, Germany, France, UK, your closest allies are telling you, nope, cut it out. You know, you should get the message at one point. You should get the message at one point.